Hello, and welcome to Community Voices, where we talk to Humboldt County's movers and shakers. Today's guest, Tom Wheeler, Executive Director of Environmental Information Protection Center. And now here's your host, Paul Bressoud.
Hello and welcome to Access Humboldt's Community Voices. My name is Paul Bressoud. I'm your host. Today we're speaking with Tom Wheeler, the Executive Director from EPIC, the Environmental Protection Information Center. Welcome, Tom.
Well, thank you for having me.
Well, I always start with my guests by asking them, what is their job? So I'm going to do the same with you. What is the Executive Director of EPIC? And what do you do?
Well, I sometimes joke that most of my job is just sending threatening letters to people. And really, that's not too far off of the truth. So in addition to being the executive director, I'm also an attorney with EPIC. And so I direct our program work. I write comments on NEPA projects, National Environmental Policy Act projects, review documents. It is a lot of reading and writing, and a lot of kind of boring interactions with the government that sometimes erupt into something fun and memorable, like a lawsuit.
Well, let's look at we'll pass the boring. We'll get to the fun and memorable. But looking at your website, there are a lot of issues, a lot of important issues. How do you choose the issues or the campaigns you decide to take on?
It's a great question.
Thank you.
Sometimes I don't really even know how we end up doing something. Generally, we try to figure out what is going to be the biggest conservation bang for our buck, right? So EPIC has a small staff. We're only 5 people. And so we can't work on everything. This generally means that fighting individual projects is more difficult for us. And so we try to take on more systemic issues. So, for example, we worked on the Humboldt County Medical Marijuana Land Use Ordinance and the Commercial Cannabis Land Use Ordinance, which are sometimes better referred to as 1.0 and 2.0. And so we put a lot of time into developing comments on those ordinances, going before the Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors as they were considering these ordinances. But we haven't spent a ton of time engaging on individual projects because it is a bit like drinking from a fire hose there. The Humboldt County has a planning department solely devoted to processing cannabis permits with 10 people or so in that department. So we just don't have the capacity to engage at that level. So generally, we don't work on kind of individual issues. We try to stick to more broad systemic problems. But every once in a while, taking on an individual project, whether it's a timber sale on a national forest or a timber harvest plan on private lands, or some sort of a sequel project, California Environmental Quality Act, like the Terrigen Wind project outside of Scotia from a couple of years ago, or EPIC was just testifying before the Board of Supervisors on Tuesday regarding a cannabis project. Sometimes we'll see that we can make a kind of we can set precedent by winning on an individual project and change the larger system by taking one thing on. So it's hard to say how I figure out.
Let me ask a couple of questions based on your answer.
Yeah.
First of all, for our viewers and for people to understand, so the issues that you're concerned with, let's say like on 1.0 or 2.0, are how they affect the environment. So if a project goes in, it has to be environmentally sound, and that's the issue. A planning department might want to see that they meet the regulations of the county, but then you're going to take it that extra step farther and make sure that they're environmentally sound. Am I correct in assuming that?
Yeah. So let's take the example of this Rolling Meadows Ranch cannabis project, which was recently approved by the Board of Supervisors. So EPIC opposed the certification of that project and the approval of that project because we saw in it a lot of kind of troubling patterns that we see at other projects. And so it is an effect kind of illustrative of a larger issue. So it might be that project met all of the Humboldt County rules and regulations, but we believe that these rules and regulations have a pretty glaring loophole. And so by trying to advocate for the board to not approve that project, our hope was that then we could set some sort of a precedent that, in the planning department's interpretation of their own rules, they should try to have a better interpretation to close this loophole.
Tom, would it be better then, and this is just me listening to your answer, wouldn't it be better to look for those individual projects that do set those precedents, because the precedents are going to be what are so important, and it would seem to me that the precedents would lead to the advancement that you'd be looking for?
Yeah, generally that's what I think you're describing my job a little bit better than I can. So that is what I'm trying to do. I think is on individual projects. We will take them on if we believe that we can set some sort of a precedent, and that might be formal legal precedent. In our common law system here in the United States, judges' decisions functionally act as the law, and so we can have interpretations that are binding on other courts. So we recently won at the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, for example, on the interpretation of whether the Forest Service was allowed to do commercial logging under this one particular area that was really kind of intended for less intense actions. So that's one way that we can set precedent, is legal precedent, but there's also kind of non-binding or rhetorical precedent. So if we get the Board of Supervisors, for example, to deny a permit, then that sets some sort of a precedent for the Planning Commission, for the Planning Department, that they should interpret their own rules and regulations slightly differently if they don't want to have the supervisors overturn their decisions.
Let me ask you some questions and then follow me here. Environmental issues, of course, are global.
Yeah.
Your environmental focus is on our regional issues. Do you go ahead and connect with other environmental agencies? Are there precedents that are out there elsewhere in the United States that can be applied to the region in which you're serving?
Yeah, so here in Humboldt County, we're kind of in a unique spot. We are in the Pacific Northwest. Our landscape is more akin to Oregon and Washington and British Columbia than it is to most of the rest of California. So what we often do is we actually look north to our neighbors in Washington and Oregon to see how they are doing things and see if we can bring in some interpretations, some ways of doing things from those areas. Because, so much of California kind of forgets that we exist up here on the North Coast.
So with environmental issues, well, I want to say right off the bat, with environmental issues, has it been hard to keep them in the forefront during the time of the pandemic? Has it been hard to catch people's attention regarding environmental issues?
The Trump administration made it pretty easy to keep it on people's minds. The last couple months of the Trump administration were a rush to get in new rules through the rulemaking process before they were out of office. I think that starting in this summer, we saw just a frantic mad dash the finish line. And so it was there were enough high profile issues that they were pushing through that it was fairly easy for us to continue to talk about the environment because we were just having such wholesale destruction of our federal environmental framework that that it was so precedent setting, so big that it was hard to ignore.
You know, I'm an old union guy, and I used to say administrators are the best organizers because they go ahead and do things that people can rally around. How do you get people to rally around? Well, you've explained that it got their attention, but just the fact of connecting people right now to go ahead and participate in issues, how difficult has that been?
Well, thankfully, you know, you and I are talking by Skype. The tools that we have today make it a lot easier. I can't imagine how Epic could have done our job, 40 years ago when we were founded. So it's certainly different. It's taken some getting used to. I think we've all have taken a number of months to figure out how to live in this new normal. But now that we're here, we're able to engage with our members through webinars, through Skype meetings, and really use all the blessings of technology to keep us connected and to keep us on the radar of our members. And really, this has actually been kind of fantastic in some respects. We hosted a number of webinars this summer that we had never thought to do. We were able to do a lot of educational work with our members to talk about climate change, to talk about how to do some basic kind of activist work. We hosted 3 webinars on how to comment on a timber harvest plan. So how to find the documents and how to review them. And I don't know if we would have thought of this if we were not in a pandemic, if we could have, gone to the festivals and done booth outreach and stuff like that.
I want to ask, do you think there's a situation here where you're kind of redefining activism?
Activism has been kind of under a long-term evolution for a while. I think that this was really heightened by the adoption of email as a platform to engage and to talk with members. For the very beginning of our existence, for up until 2000 or so, we primarily would talk to our members by doing a mailer where we would, physically print something and ship it out to folks. And we still do that from time to time, but we've moved a lot of activism online, and that has been for better or for worse, right? It has enabled folks from all across the world to weigh in on decisions that affect the North Coast of California. So we have EPIC members in Sweden, we have EPIC members in New Orleans, in New York, and Massachusetts, and they're able to weigh in on a Forest Service timber sale on the Six Rivers National Forest, which is something that we're currently doing right now. We're trying to get people to speak out against post-fire logging. In some ways, it's also taken the pressure off of doing in-person activism, which is not great. Back in the day when you just kind of had to organize an in-person protest because that was the vehicle to be heard, it's a lot easier to ignore somebody just emailing you than it is if you're just blockading their office or something like that. So I think with the rise of online activism, clicktivism is one of the terms that gets used because it's just as easy as clicking your mouse. We see some reduced effectiveness of an individual's voice, but then we also see increased activism and increased engagement because we can reach more people than we would have previously. So I don't know. It's a hard trade-off.
Do emails that come from Sweden or New Orleans carry the same weight to a board of supervisors locally that are talking about issues in this very specific place?
They will tell you that it doesn't. And frequently, if Epic ever does target the Board of Supervisors, you'll hear Rex Bone or Virginia Bass complain about how they got emails from Sweden, and therefore, this is just meaningless activism, and people don't know what they're talking about. They're not even from here, right? And so you'll have some dismissal, but it's also to dismiss people's concerns when you fill up an inbox. And through our action alert that we're able to do through our website, through email, we're able to get 1,000 emails into somebody's inbox in a day. We've actually broken servers from just overwhelming people with emails. So when that happens, the sheer volume of them, it speaks loudly. And I will take all of those Swedish people who care about our redwoods. I appreciate all of their activism as well.
So when the pandemic ends, will there be a hybrid sort of activism that includes the old street fairs, the Equinox Festival, the 4th of July on the plaza or whatnot, or going out and actively recruiting people, or maybe holding webinars at the site where people have hands-on? Is that going to be combined with this different kind of activism?
I think so. I think that there have been a lot of learning lessons from COVID. And I hope that we're able to take all the things that worked well and were good about this time and keep them, and then go back and do the things that we missed and do those again. So I'm really looking forward to getting back to Benbow Summer Arts and the North Country Fair and being able to talk with folks in person and to tell them and to show them our work. But I'm also still very excited about my ability now to do these webinars with folks from all across the state of California, to let people know how they can be better activists. And that's really a new tool that is added to our arsenal. And I think that it will pay off.
Let me ask you about something specific that I read on the website, and because it's so current and dramatic, and how what Epic is working on along those lines. There was a listing about the slide south of Crescent City, and that you were talking to Caltrans. So talk to us about the environmental issues, and then also talk to us about how do you go ahead and take on an organization like Caltrans?
Yeah, I mean, we've been dancing with Caltrans for a number of years now. So as you know, we've fought them over Richardson Grove State Park and their proposal to widen the highway there for over 14 years now. We've kept that project at bay. The Last Chance Grade example is an interesting one because I think that we're seeing an evolving agency at Caltrans. So the new statewide director comes from a pedestrian infrastructure improvement background. So he was big into getting people out of their cars and walking and biking. And we're seeing kind of a changing of the guard locally too, where a lot of the kind of older engineer types that every problem could be fixed by adding more asphalt, they're being replaced by folks who have come of age in a different time where the curriculum is different at planning school. So I'm very excited about how the Last Chance Grade process is going. I think that in that we see Caltrans really learning from the mistakes of Richardson Grove and really attempting to do good, meaningful stakeholder engagement. So they're talking with Epic, they're talking with other environmental groups like my friends in Del Norte, with the Friends of Del Norte. And they're also bringing in tribes and local businesses to try to find a solution that is good and cooperative so that we can avoid a 14-year protracted fight like we have at Richardson Grove. They are a behemoth, though, and there is an equity of power in that it's a multi-billion-dollar state agency, and we're just a little pipsqueak group from the North Coast. But this speaks to the power of having folks or having organizations like EPIC who have lawyers like myself or my friend Matt, who is our newest hire at EPIC, an attorney right out of UCLA Law. Having our ability to access courts, to utilize state and federal environmental laws, it really levels the playing field and forces them to take us more seriously.
Is it exciting as a lawyer to be in these David and Goliath situations?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I see a gleam in you relish that.
Yeah, I mean, I went to law school to take on the big environmental fights of our day, to try to do something meaningful about climate change, to try to stop the extinction epidemic that we're seeing across the planet. So it is romantic in some sense to be able to take on these David and Goliath fights and to win them.
But it's also, I would assume, very nuts and bolts as far as when you talk about individual projects and setting precedents. And I mean, your members probably get excited about the David and Goliath, but organizing people around the nuts and bolts is harder, I bet.
Yeah, and so I think that you will see that reflected in fundraising. When I'm sending out a fundraising letter, I think that most of the time we're talking about the big sexy legal fights that we're in, as opposed to the day-to-day. And really, the day-to-day is just as meaningful as those big sexy legal fights. It's the building of relationships and building of trust, being regarded as a valuable stakeholder in kind of decision-making processes. That stuff is invaluable. It is also hard to communicate to our members. So thankfully, they have supported us for over 40 years, and it enables us to do the sexy work, the work that gets splashy headlines, and it allows us to do the work that is critically important but not terribly interesting to read about.
Can you get members to understand that precedents are sexy?
Yeah, I think so. Can I get members to understand that networking and building relationships is sexy? I'm not sure, but they've supported us for a terribly long time, and I think that they must know that it's not just running to court. That's not just what EPIC is. So
then this question, the hats that you wear, how much of your time is spent fundraising?
Well, thankfully, very little time, actually. And I'm probably a pretty bad executive director for that reason. I started at EPIC as the program director, and then when my previous boss, Natalie Delap, left to start the Humboldt County Growers Alliance, I became the executive director. And so I do a lot of the fundraising work and the administrative work, not by choice, but by need, not because I find it to be terribly fun. So I should probably do a better job at it. I should probably try a little bit harder at it. But again, this is just a testament to our great members, our great supporters, that we can get away with just sending 2 or 3 mailers a year asking for money, and they come in, and membership support is our number one category of support, above foundations or money that we win in lawsuits or anything like that. So it is a testament to how deep people in our community care about EPIC, and I'm truly touched.
With the people that care about EPIC, let me ask this question. Are there people that bring issues to you, things that were beyond your scope that you hadn't seen on the radar?
Yeah, I have about 400 unread emails in my inbox with just those. So if you have an email out to me, I apologize, and eventually I'll get back to you. And getting tipped off about projects, that's one of the main ways that we learn about what's happening in the community. That's how we take up issues. So if you ever think that we should be working on something, let us know.
Well, that seems like a great way to end because we're out of time. So let Tom know if you have something out there. Like I said, that's all the time we have for today. I want to thank Tom Wheeler of Epic. I've enjoyed it thoroughly. Keep fighting the good fight. And I'd like to say thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Community Voices. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
This has been Community Voices with your host, Paul Bressoud. Thank you for joining us. If you represent a nonprofit organization and are interested in being a guest on Community Voices, send an email to info@accesshumboldt.net or call 476-1798. Access Humboldt, local voices through community media.